What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Even though the third generation of Pokémon changed a lot, mostly by nature of being on the better hardware of the Game Boy Advance, I would say the most impactful alteration to the game was the invention of abilities. This gave every Pokémon one extra trick in addition to their attacks that could help you in various ways. Sometimes that's to win a battle with some chip damage or boosting power. However, there are quite a few abilities in Pokémon that are not very good in combat or have zero battling interactions at all. But most people know that I don't even care about competitive and largely appreciate Pokémon by how we can journey together through the story of a game, which is a totally different mindset in how you can look at a useful ability. So let's see which abilities are best outside of the competitive scene. Like for instance, say the ability Runaway, which has no combat capabilities at all, but it is great to run away from any wild Pokémon so that you don't get damaged along the way. But a similar case could be made for Arena Trap. Now, I know that Dugtrio is a decently strong and incredibly fast Pokémon, so sneaking one onto the battlefield to destroy an unsuspecting Magnezone that can't switch out is pretty nice. However, 2/3 of the Pokémon that can get Arena Trap are ones that you would never use in a competitive battle anyway. So not only can you have more opportunities to use Arena Trap in a standard playthrough, but the out-of-battle effects are arguably even better, with it drawing in wild Pokémon to make it 200% more likely that Pokémon will even appear. Or at least it did before Gen 9, but if you're out there looking for Pokémon, which is usually about half the time in these games, then a Diglett or Trapinch would be a major help to you in a way that they could never be in a professional tournament, all thanks to their ability over the Earth. Another ability prized for its out-of-battle effects would be Synchronize. This ability allows you to copy-paste status conditions the opponent uses right back onto them. So you basically get a free burn or paralysis or sleep. However, that used to be a lot better because nowadays there are plenty of Pokémon that are immune to such statuses, and they just so happen to be the ones most likely to use them against you. You can't poison a poison type after all, so in that case, Synchronize is pretty useless. Same goes for freezing an ice type or burning a fire type. So while Synchronize can be considered okay to decent at best, it is invaluable outside of battle for ensuring that you get a Pokémon with the nature that you want. Now, there are some people out there that don't know or care anything about natures, and that's fine, but for the basics of the game to at least make sure that your chosen speedy physical sweeper doesn't have one of those critical stats intrinsically lowered by its nature, it is a good idea to pay attention to natures even a slight amount. And Synchronize can help with that by having a 50% chance that a wild Pokémon will sync up with yours and have their nature be the same. Even though they are different Pokémon species, they could still both benefit from a higher special attack, for example, so this ability can make it far easier to cultivate the team that you want, even for the most casual of players. Now, another ability that could be more useful by its distribution is Battery, because as of now, the only Pokémon that can have it is Charjabug. Not even the other members of its line, only the middle pupa stage is blessed with this ability, probably because it does look like a battery, but nobody out there is going to rely on a Charjabug as the ace for their team, not even Sophocles. Now, the Battery ability isn't the most impressive since it just boosts an ally Pokémon's special attack by 30%, which could be something that could come in handy in the doubles format of competitive, just not with a Charjabug. So that's why it works better in a playthrough, because Sun and Moon made us use a Charjabug way more than we ever wanted to. You literally couldn't get a Vikavolt for hours until the final spot in the story of the game, so we were stuck with a Charjabug for pretty much our whole time in Alola. And it wasn't even much better in the Ultra games, where it was on the back half of the third island instead. So you're infinitely more likely to find a use for Charjabug when you have to, versus when you basically have unlimited other competitive options. I would say the same goes for the Moody ability too, but that's just because it's been banned in select circles. However, this is an exclusively hidden ability, and therefore not often usable in a playthrough. Although I do think you could say that about Analytic as an ability, since it boosts the attack power of Pokémon by 30% when they go last in the turn. Now, you can work around a slow Pokémon, but speed is pretty pivotal in a battle, since it doesn't really matter if you have boosted power if the opponent went first and knocked you out. That's why the whole concept of Trick Room exists, to invert the speed and make slow Pokemon better. So I would say it's more of a nice happenstance if you get to use the analytic ability in competitive and not the hallmark of your strategy. Which is good because analytic has a really weird spread of Pokemon where some are pretty much always guaranteed to get the boost, and some that are probably only here because it sounds good with the name. But this works out great if you're trying out a mid-tier Pokemon like Behem, who is just pitifully slow, which means that it's pretty much always guaranteed to get the boost. And then you can just feed it some potions, or go back to the Pokemon Center to heal it because you're freely playing through the game. And it makes Pokemon that get slower even more worth the trade-off in power, thanks to their overly analytical abilities. Personally, I would probably say the same about the ability Technician, even though I know there are certainly competitive applications to having 60 base power or below attacks get doubled in strength, but starting a new playthrough is where you're going to be seeing most low-powered moves, because literally all of your attacks would be below that threshold. Plus, with a lot of the pre-evolutions getting this ability too, you can use it as soon as you catch them, like when I had a Scyther that tore through everything with Wing Attack, Fury Cutter, and Vacuum Wave. So, for those still frowning about Technician's competitive superiority, relax, would ya? I would say they're at least on equal footing, but I do think you would probably get the most bang for your buck with Technician in the casual market. I would also say the Quick Feet ability is in a similar boat. This ability increases speed when they have a status condition, which is pretty decent and more diversified than Tangled Feet, which only boosts the evasion with Confusion as its single trick, so it's by no means useless, but what makes Quick Feet better for casuals is the out-of-battle effect that decreases the likelihood of encountering wild Pokemon by 50%. Sometimes you just don't want to bother with 30 low-level Hoppips, so a free pseudo-repel can come in handy. And if you do want to collect more Pokemon, then just take them out of the lead party slot and you're good to go. So honestly, you may not even realize that you have Quick Feet if your Pokemon is fast enough, but you will have a much better time if you use it to avoid wild Pokemon without even knowing it, because of their fleet-footed freakout over any ailment they might have. However, there's one more ability that I would suggest is much better for a casual setting with Harvest. There are quite a few abilities that deal with berries for some reason, but Harvest has a double dose of casual appreciation because it also affects Pokemon encounter rates. This time, it specifically increases the appearances of grass types, so that can be pretty good if you're a gardener or aroma lady. But since Harvest's main function is a 50% chance to restore a berry that's already been used, it becomes a favorite of shiny hunters everywhere, especially in the Alola region. The trick was to swap a Leppa berry onto the target, and then give them the Harvest ability so that it can never run out of PP on its moves and it can't struggle itself to death, which means that you can just infinitely take out its SOS buddies until you find the shiny one. That's how I got my amazing shiny Lycanrocs. But it also works for just finding rare SOS partners in general, like Corsola, or even if you just stumble across random solo Pokemon in any generation that you don't want to die and need to stay healthy. You could use Oran or Citrus Berries to make it regain that health, and you can even ensure that it works every single turn with sunlight in effect, because that obviously helps the Harvest to grow even better and have these grass types thrive in the sun. Granted, these features have been stripped away somewhat in Gen 9 due to the strict overworld encounters, but that just means that we can find new abilities to appreciate, like Galarian Slowbro's Quick Draw giving a burst of speed every so often to this incredibly slow Pokemon. Hopefully we could see it spread more one day to others of its speed-challenged brethren, or maybe you're just a huge fan of how the Magma Armor ability helps to hatch eggs. But what Pokemon abilities do you appreciate most for its casual uses? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded!